Good day, third graders. Hope you're all doing well. We are in the Colonial America unit, jumping into Lesson 5, the founding of Maryland and Georgia today. So let's get started. Right, some vocabulary words for you to pay attention to. Buffer, like a shield between two things. Confirmed, or to be assured or proved. Debtors, people that owe money. Inevitable, infamous, interference, laborious, and toleration. What have we learned? Well, what cash crop saved Jamestown and helped the southern colonies to prosper? Tobacco. Very good. What is the name given to settlers whose passage to North America was paid for by somebody else? Indentured servants. What group of people was forced to come to North America from Africa to work for no pay and denied freedom? Slaves. Enslaved Africans, actually. And there were actually also slaves from a lot of different other places too, not just Africa. What three crops were planted as cash crops in Carolina? Tobacco, rice, and indigo. Very good. Okay, what was the name given to the trade route from Europe to Africa? The triangular trade route. And hopefully you had time to do the quiz that I posted as well. If you don't, just go back and do it today. That's not a problem. We're going to talk today a little bit more about the lawmaking groups and Parliament, Great Britain, all the stuff going on in the colonies to try to create laws and start organizing themselves, and then ends up really getting organized. So let's go ahead and jump into the story. With so much trading, with so much trade going on, and the abundance of ships laden with valuable cargo, it's inevitable or unavoidable that pirates would make an appearance in the story. The English colonies, particularly those in the southern region and the West Indies, became well known as a place where pirates hid from the law. These pirates are known as buccaneers. Buccaneers were a group of men from England, France, and Holland. They terrorized sailors, captured trade ships in this region. Because of the success of the infamous pirates, some countries were forced to send naval ships to the New World to accompany their trade ships safely back to port. This New World was turning out to be a place with all kinds of people had the opportunity to become rich. So we know pirates are those who steal goods from others at sea. And the word infamous is to be well known for having a bad reputation. So you don't want to be infamous. Back on land, the English colonies were expanding. Today you will learn about two more colonies, Maryland and Georgia. Both of these colonies have an interesting history. However, the development of Maryland and Georgia was a little different from that of Virginia. Let's begin with Maryland. You learned about the large plantations that were prevalent in the South. Maryland was considered a southern colony, though it was geographically in the middle Atlantic region. Although there were many small farms in Maryland, there were a fair number of large plantations in the southern portion. Like Virginia, Maryland's economy was based on tobacco agriculture as a cash crop. Remember, cash crop is what they grow in order to make money, not necessarily to eat. And they had to be reminded a lot of times to grow other stuff so they could actually eat. Okay, here's all the colonies. We haven't talked about all 13 yet, but this is a map showing you where they're located. Before he was killed, Charles I had given a large section of land to the north of Virginia to a friend. This time, the lucky recipient of the land was Sir George Calvert. Sir Calvert, who is also known as Lord Baltimore, received this generous gift in 1632. Sir Calvert was a Roman Catholic. In England at that time, Roman Catholics were not very well liked because they were not part of the official Church of England. The Church of England, the Anglican Church, had split apart from the Roman Catholic Church. Now, Baltimore is the capital of Maryland, so that's clearly where they're getting the name from. Again, we name a lot of things after people. Many people in England at that time believed the Roman Catholics would be more loyal to the Catholic Pope than to the Queen. They did not like that. However, because King Charles's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, was Catholic, Charles tried to be respectful of Catholics for her sake. Delighted by Charles's gift, Sir Calvert named his colony Maryland in honor of Queen Maria. Maryland was different from Virginia because it was controlled by Sir Calvert's family. Sir Calvert's son Cecil determined that Maryland would be a safe haven for Catholics. In the beginning, it was, in fact. 1634, Cecil's brother, Lord Calvert, led the first group of Catholics to the colony. Leonard Calvert later became the first governor of Maryland. The colonists in Maryland made it a priority to make peace with the local Native Americans right away. They did not waste time searching for gold, but instead immediately established farms and trading posts. They soon settled into organized communities with laws that were clearly defined. It wasn't long before word got out that Maryland was quite a nice place to live. It still is, I've heard, actually. Never been there. Do need to visit it. Anyway, Europeans searching for a better life free of poverty and religious persecution journeyed to this colony. And it wasn't just the Roman Catholics who came. Other Christians who belonged to different churches came to settle in Maryland too. When people experience persecution, they are made to suffer because of what they believe in. There's a lot of that still going on. Before long, Maryland became known as a place that practiced religious freedom, so much that in 1649, Lord Baltimore had the Maryland General Assembly pass the Act of Toleration. This law stated that all Christians in Maryland would be tolerated or allowed the freedom to worship. This law confirmed that Christians from different churches, Protestants, Catholics, and others, would practice their religion without interference. Interference meaning what? People get in the way, right? This is important for us to remember as the founding of our country. There is a lot about religious tolerance. That's really why our country was founded. A lot of places and colonies in our country were founded based on them wanting to get away from England and be allowed to worship the way they wanted to. We can't forget that the foundation of this country is built upon that religious tolerance. The importance of the government not being able to say when churches should be closed and churches should be open. The last southern colony to be founded was Georgia. One day, a member of Parliament in London, England, named James Oglethorpe, had a brainstorm. Oglethorpe had noticed that English jails were overflowing with debtors. In England during this time, people were put into jail, called a debtor's prison, if they were unable to pay their debts. Sometimes these jail debtors owed a little money, sometimes they owed a lot. Oglethorpe had noticed that these debtors, even those who owed relatively small amounts of money, were often left to die in jail without any way of paying back the money they owed. Oglethorpe's unique idea was to set up a new colony in North America where these debtors would be given a second chance. They would be given land so they could begin a new life. They could work to pay back the money they owed, and when their debt would be forgiven, Parliament, by the way, is the name of the governing body which still exists in Great Britain today. Debtors are people who owe money to other people. Okay. Ooh, look, I'm king. Anyway, in 1732, the then King George II liked this idea. He gave Oglethorpe a charter saying he could take a band of debtors from England to the area of land between South Carolina and Spanish Florida. The British Parliament supported this venture by giving Oglethorpe money and ships to make the journey. Upon reaching this new land, Oglethorpe named it Georgia, after his royal majesty. Kings just expected a new land to be named after them. Georgia was even larger back then than the state of Georgia is today. It included much of present-day Alabama and Mississippi. So there was quite a nice piece of land King George gave to James Oglethorpe. Of course, this is all land that he really technically didn't own, but whatever. Right? However, even though sending debtors to the New World seemed like a brilliant plan to Oglethorpe and the king, it was difficult to persuade many debtors to leave their families and homeland and sail 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean to a place where they might not be welcomed with open arms. Once they arrived, the debtors would have to build their own homes as well as gather, hunt, and grow their own food. Many debtors preferred to serve their time in jail in England rather than face the unknown New World. Some might say beggars can't be choosers. In all, about 100 debtors agreed to go to the journey to North America. They began the laborious task of helping turn Georgia into a colony. You will hear more about this saying, beggars can't be choosers. It's used to describe those who are not in a position to be picky about things they're given. Okay. In this context, do you think laborious describes something easy or difficult? Laborious task. Think about that. Is it easy or difficult? Heavy labor, probably not easy. All right, this is our picture for Georgia. As soon as he arrived in Georgia, Oglethorpe met with the leader of the Yamacraw, a group of Native Americans in the region. Chief Tamachichi and the Yamakraw were willing to trade with the English and allow them to settle there. Oglethorpe worked hard to establish alliances with Yamakraw and even invited some of them to visit England. Oglethorpe and his band of debtors developed the first settlement in Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia. Savannah remains a thriving, well-known city in the state of Georgia today. And this guy is awesome, because as soon as you try to make positive relationships with the Native Americans that are currently living in that land, you have my vote. So Georgia, good. All right. Here's again that map. So this is, Georgia down here. And of course, King George had another motive for sending settlers to Georgia besides helping debtors start a new life. As you can see on the map, Georgia is located between the Carolinas and what was known as Spanish Florida. So Spanish Florida is down this way. At that point, the British had not established any official colonies to the south of Carolina, so this was a perfect way to protect the colonies from the Spanish. Georgia served as a buffer zone to separate English colonies from the Spanish colonies. This would also allow colonists to keep an eye on the Spanish ambitions for growth in North America. But King George did not realize that the Spanish had already claimed the very area he had in mind. It wasn't long before there was an armed confrontation between the Spanish and the British. As time went by, more and more settlers arrived in Georgia. Some of them did not get along with the native people as well as Oglethorpe and his followers had. The Spanish continued to stake their claim to the land. The buccaneers often attacked viral trade ships. This new colony, the last one to be created, suffered its fair share of problems in its early days. Whereas few debtors would agree to come and settle in Georgia, many poor Europeans from other countries began to arrive and establish farms in this colony. They came primarily from Iceland and Germany. Georgian families liked the idea of plantation farming as it had proved successful in other southern colonies. However, the colonists soon found farming to be a backbreaking job and insisted they needed help. Although it was first decided that Georgia would be a slave-free colony, the introduction of slavery slowly began. Before long, Georgia became the colony identified with plantation life and the heavy use of enslaved laborers. Within 100 years of being established, the state of Georgia had more plantations than any other state in the South, and the second largest number of enslaved Africans, second only to Virginia. So not really a good thing. Okay, so reasons we heard why people left their homeland. Well, Christians came to escape persecution, find a safe haven. Debtors came to Georgia to work to pay back their debts, and poor Europeans came to start a new life. And people still come to America to start a new life 100 years later. What problem in the colonies seemed to be solved at this time? That would be farmers needed help with their plantations, so they brought enslaved Africans, which is unfortunate. Before he was killed, whom did King George give the land? Lord Baltimore. That's why we have Baltimore, Maryland. All right. And he named it after Queen Maria, and he created the colony as a safe haven for Christians to worship freely. All right, so Maryland is a safe haven for Christians to marry, and Georgia is a place for debtors. Remember those two things. Okay, let's just flip through the rest of this. Pay attention to the cards that we've created or the pictures of the different colonies. I'll show you in a minute where all the colonies line up on our timeline. We have Roanoke in 1587, Jamestown in 1607, slavery started, Maryland 1632, Carolinas, and Georgia 1732. Okay. That gives you an idea of where they fit in. All right, so you do need to remember some of these things, and you will have a discussion question to follow up on. If you didn't get the quiz done, you still have time to work on that for last week. There'll be another one at the end of this week, so try to keep up with that. Okay, so you've heard about the infamous pirates and buccaneers seemed inevitable or unavoidable during the colonies. So explain why, and you'll be answering that question in the discussions. All right, third graders. Yes, I can work on this word work inevitable. And we're just going to fumble through here. You can read this on your own time if you want to. All right. And pay attention to these questions. You might jot those down in your notes. Have a good day, third graders.